Conquest of Chaucer, 500, 1340. From the Norman Conquest to the beginning of the 13th century, English had a severe struggle to maintain itself as a written language. And as a consequence, English literature, which for nearly 200 years before William's landing had shown little sign of life, now for another period of 150 years almost ceased to exist. Its revival began in the reign of John, by which time the long-standing hostility between the native population and the invaders had been to a large extent outgrown. And, as the famous incident of Magna Carta shows, the two elements had been welded into a single people. The loss of the French possessions of the English crown tended still further to confirm the growing unity of the nation. In these circumstances, English began to assert itself beside the rival tongue, which was already losing ground, and with this, English literature assumes a certain historical interest. It now becomes clear how much has been gained in the meantime by the accumulation of fresh materials from various sources. We see this in the case of the first noteworthy production of the revival, Brut, completed about 1205 by Layman, a parish priest of Worcestershire. This enormous poem of some 30,000 lines contains the legendary history of ancient Britain, beginning with Aeneas, whose descendant Brutus was the supposed ancestor of the British people, ending with Cadwallader, the last of the native kings, and including, by the way, among innumerable episodes, the stories of Lear and King Arthur. But the point of special importance in connection with it is that it is a paraphrase with additions of a versified chronicle, Brut d'Angleterre, of the Anglo-Norman poet Wace, which in its turn had been based upon the so-called history of Britain by the romancing Welsh annalist, Geoffrey of Monmouth. In Layman's poem, then, three streams of influence, Celtic, French, and English run together, while through inversification it follows the Anglo-Saxon principle of alliteration. French taste is reflected in the occasional appearance of rhyme. A little later came Armulum, about 1215, a series of metrical homilies, in short lines without either rhyme or alliteration, by a Lincolnshire priest named Orme. And a prose treatise, the Ancren Ryle, about 1225, or Rule of Anchresses, prepared by some unknown writer for the guidance of three ladies entering the religious life. A charming dialogue poem, The Owl and the Nightingale, in which the two birds discuss their respective merits, is historically interesting because it discards alliteration and adopts French and rhymes. This is the only other piece of native 13th century literature which calls for mention. The principal productions of the early 14th century, Robert Manning's Handling Scene, a Manual of Scenes, 1303, the prose Iambite of Ingwit, Remorse of Conscience, 1340, both translated from the French, and the Cursor Mundi, about 1320, a versified account of scriptural history together with many legends of the saints belong to religious rather than to general literature.